All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 114, 114. It's Sunday night. There's so much going on. We wanted to talk to you. We're going to have ourselves a guest. I could see my co host. My name's Bob Kyrie. I've got Sirius. He's going to be joining us. And then we're going to be joined by the Athletics, Chris Vannini. He's going to be joining us, return guest. We talked to him a bit in the offseason, but there's so much going on right now that we figured let's have someone come in and join us. I know he's wrapping up an article because some of you might have seen this evening. North Texas decided to fire Seth Luttrell effective immediately. He went 44-44, perfectly even record over 7 seasons. He just lost the Conference USA title game to UTSA, and I think they just kind of ran out of patience at North Texas. So that was kind of I wouldn't say a shocker, but certainly not a termination we expected. So we got that going on as well. Sirius have been able to make it up.
I have. I'm here.
Yeah, so lots going on today. I mean, obviously, again, if you'd like to also join us, you're always welcome to hit request. We can talk to you there. But, what really struck you this championship weekend?
I mean, I think it was interesting. We started off with 2 upsets in the P5 matches, with USC losing to Utah. And honestly, I think getting a little bit embarrassed. We kind of expected, I think a lot of us thought that some of the things that had plagued Lincoln Riley's teams when he was at Oklahoma, specifically the lack of defense, it didn't seem like he was doing much to address that when he went to USC. Bring over the same defensive coordinator who, back when he was hired, Alex Grinch was supposed to, revolutionize the Oklahoma defense. He was supposed to fix the problems, get them back to, having a stout defense. And it just didn't seem like it ever appeared. And I think maybe people thought, well, Big 12 is a high flying offense kind of conference. They're having to go up against elite passers, things like that. And then he gets to USC, and it's more of the same. And I think probably the most shocking thing in that game for me was the total lack of effort by the USC defense, unless it was something for kind of like a flashy play where you could get a turnover. Guys just, they weren't tackling, they weren't trying to wrap up. Utah players were just blowing right past them or through them time and time again, and it just turned into a rout by the end of the game. And then, man, that Kansas State TCU game was just outstanding. You hate it for Max Duggan. Game got taken out of his hand there at the end. A lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on as far as that goes. But what a thrilling game. Coming right down to the wire, and that was pretty awesome. Georgia did Georgia things to LSU. Michigan. All I can think back is we shared this comment on the subreddit a while back about watching a Michigan game is like seeing a psychopath drowning a ferret.
Yeah.
In a bathtub. Where at first there's a lot of commotion and there's water everywhere, and the ferret draws a little bit of blood, and you think, hey, maybe he's going to get out of this, but then the psychopath's grip just keeps getting tighter and tighter. And I think that's how it is this year with Michigan, right? Like in the first half, especially, they kind of start off a little bit slow. Teams that should be pretty easily outmatched are hanging with them, maybe even have a lead. And then the second half comes around and Michigan just, the grip gets tighter and tighter, and they choke the life out of them until, you look at the final score and it looks like they had it in hand, most of the game. But yeah, I think that was kind of, we all kind of got excited. Like Purdue's hanging with them, right? Purdue's leading.
So serious, I have to actually ask you a quick favor. We have a funny situation here with Twitter being in the state it is. I can't see any of the guests on my account. However, I logged in on my computer and I can see Chris is in the audience. Can you see him? And if not, can you log out and log back in? Because I can't do that. I'm the host. If I do that, I'll accidentally end the space.
Okay, so I saw Chris when he hopped on. I sent him an invite to be a speaker.
I am here now.
There we go.
Okay, there you are. I'm not. This is classic, isn't it? We're just doing these to see until Twitter finally goes kaput, because I literally right now can only see that there's me, Sirius, and all the the other listeners, which typically means people who, I can't see. So I was like, oh my gosh, I looked on the computer and then I saw you're on it. And I'm like, okay, well, this is typical. But how are you doing?
Good. Tough timing with North Texas making a change tonight, but I should be all good. I've got the job profile basically written as I actually wrote it last year when they were 1-6 and starting the year, and it looked like Seth Luttrell was about to be fired. Instead, they won.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Instead, they won their final 5 games to get to a bowl game, and had an okay
upset UTSA.
Yeah, had an okay year this year. Almost won Conference USA, but ultimately, school feels like it should be better than it is at this moment, and it's notable. The school's only had 3 winning seasons since 2005, not including this year. Currently at 7-6, but 2 of those came under Luttrell with Mason Fine at quarterback. But last couple years, 6-6, 6-7, 7-6. The program feels like it can be a lot better. It's got really nice facilities, a lot of money put into there. They're ready to make a big jump, and they just didn't feel like Luttrell was the guy to do that.
Absolutely. In your opinion, what's been the biggest surprise in terms of who was fired so far?
I don't think there have been that many surprises. Trying to think. There hasn't been many. Like, there's always going to be a couple big surprises. Like, even now, this makes number 18, and 18 is a pretty low number. There could be more. There always is going to be more. There will be some big ones at the end. But as I'm kind of looking through the list in terms of guys getting fired, nothing. I mean, David Shaw, but that was kind of going around for a while that he could step down. He obviously wasn't fired. I wasn't surprised by Western Michigan or UNLV. Probably the biggest one was Wisconsin, and that was during the season.
That was the one I was going to guess was Paul Chryst getting fired. I mean, turns out they made potentially a huge upgrade, being able to lure Luke Fickell. I mean, that's a pretty big achievement. So I think that's probably like the splashiest hire so far, with this round.
Yeah, no, that was a spot where, when Chris gets fired, everybody says, all right, it's going to be Leonard. Leonard's the guy. And the way I put it at the time was, it's Leonard's job to lose. Like, he can get this job, but it's going to be a real search. Like, they hired a search firm. They talked to coaches over various weeks and stuff like that. Like, this was not just, see how it goes and then we'll just give them the job. No, like, they were running an entire search. There were a number of folks involved who were talked to about it. Obviously, Luke Fickell was one. Lance Leipold was another. And with the way things kind of finished up for Leonard, they get blown out by Iowa. They barely come back to beat Nebraska. And you're thinking at this point, like, he hasn't exactly done a great job to win the job. They lost to Michigan State as well, and then they closed with a loss against Minnesota, and you're like, this guy went 4-3. Like, this is not that inspiring of an interim tenure. It looks like a lot like it did before Chris got fired. And ultimately, when you're able to get Luke Fickell, a guy who took Cincinnati to the playoff, you do that. And I think that was a huge, huge addition for Wisconsin.
Do you think that if Wisconsin had the ability to get Fickell, was there any scenario where Leonard keeps that job? I mean, even if he wins out every single game from the time that he gets the interim tag, do you still go with Fickell in that case? Just because, I mean, you can.
If Jim Leonard went 7-0 as the interim coach, I think he'd have to get the job. Even if it was 6-1 or something like that, I think he'd have to get the job. We've seen interim coaches turn things around. Like Brent Key won the job at Georgia Tech. They were way better after they fired Jeff Collins. That wasn't the case with Jim Leonard at Wisconsin. And they were not exactly going up against a murderer's row of opponents. Again, it was Iowa, it was Nebraska, Michigan State, not exactly like a ton of difficult opponents. So, yeah, Leonard certainly could have won the job. I absolutely believe that. But it just wasn't to the level where I think they'd be comfortable with going with him. And with it looks like Leonard sticking around as defense coordinator, it looks like that ends up being an even bigger deal. Now you got both of them. So it really worked out.
The Georgia Tech situation was kind of interesting because, I mean, there was a lot of smoke about Willie Fritz going there. for probably a solid day or so, and then poof, that disappeared. He's staying at Tulane. Of course, wins conference championship this weekend, and then Georgia Tech sticks with their interim. And it seems like maybe it was a little bit of a kind of a win-win, where Tulane gets a guy who's obviously passionate about that job. Georgia Tech gets somebody who had a really remarkable turnaround for that team this year, considering how they started, how they looked at the beginning of the season. We'll see how he does, with a full season to run the ship himself, though.
Yeah, Georgia Tech this is where like that timing all comes into play, because a year ago, Notre Dame wanted to make a quick hire when Brian Kelly left. Luke Fickell didn't want to do that while he was preparing for the conference championship game, and they end up going with Marcus Freeman. And from my understanding is that Georgia Tech kind of wanted to get this done, and basically, like, not to say Willie Fritz can't coach the championship game, but they wanted to have a guy in place, say, we've got our coach. The transfer portal opens up on tomorrow, December 5th. We got to have our guy, and that's it. And there were maybe some misgivings over financial situations with the deal, but also that Willie Fritz didn't want to be announced as Georgia Tech's head coach when he still had his championship game to play with Tulane. And that's where it really puts a crunch on these coaches. You've got, obviously, Jamie Chadwell takes the Liberty job right after he coached at Coastal Carolina. Even last year, Billy Napier took the Florida job before he coached the championship game at Louisiana. And it's really a lot of the group of five coaches, or if you have coaches who are moving up to a bigger job and you've got a conference championship or something to play, it puts the kids in a really bad situation. And I hate it for everybody involved. But at the same time, like, you understand it by the coaches in the schools, because these things have happened so quickly. Transfer portal windows or early signing period, like, you got to have your coach in place before the season is over. And that's just, I think, not a good way to run things, but it's the way college football cobbled together its schedule.
You kind of get vibes of the whole, Les Miles is going to Michigan, the announcement coming out the day of LSU playing in the SEC championship game, or the eve of that game. And, that's kind of enough to just blow the whole thing up, because the coach has to change his mind and say, you know what, nope, I'm here. We're focusing on winning this championship first. And it kind of scuttles the whole idea of making that change, just because of, again, like you said, the timelines just don't match up right.
Yeah, I think it was Brett Bielema who once said that if his name comes out, if he's interviewing for another job and his name comes up in the media and it gets leaked, he's out. He's getting out of there. He's not going to be involved in that, because he can't trust the people involved. And kudos to him for that. I'm pretty sure his hire at Illinois maybe also came out. I mean, obviously his move from Wisconsin to Arkansas came out of the blue. So good to him for that. The problem is there's just so many working pieces involved. The leaks are generally not coming from the coach or the athletic director. It's people who are kind of on the peripheral in that process. So it's but it's just, these things happen quicker. Shoot, last year we had Georgia Southern and UConn hire coaches while the season was going on. Like Clay Helton got down there early. Jim Mora started going to the games with the team, while things were going on there. And ultimately it worked out. Both made a bowl game. Both, improved that next year. But I just hate it for the kids, because, either you fire a coach midseason, and that means the administration is basically punting on the kids on that team. Like, we've given up on this season. And that really sends a bad message to the kids about never giving up. And then the flip side is, if they're playing for the conference championship and the coach is leaving, the coach doesn't, his full undivided attention is not exactly there. And I think you see what happened with Liberty and New Mexico State. You see what happened in the Sun Belt Championship game, although I do think Troy is a very, very good team. It really sucks for the kids, and I hate it.
Speaking of timing, with this North Texas news coming right after the Meta Conference Championship game, do you think that this is an indication that the admins there maybe have their mind set on someone, that, this wasn't just we're disappointed with the season, we're going to fire him and start a new coaching search, or that it was more of a targeted, we've already kind of got somebody on our short list and we want to strike now situation?
Yeah, there's kind of two ways to look at it. One is since Ren Baker, the AD, is not there, the president can do what he wants and make the decision how he wants to do it. Or the reverse is that the AD would have done it anyway. So whether or not, like, this job was talked about for possibly being open for a while. The problem was North Texas kept winning Conference USA games. There was a stretch from 2021 to 2022 where they won 10 of 11 conference games. And when it became pretty clear that they were going to make the conference championship game, you can't fire them during the season. Had they lost to Rice, not gone to the Conference USA championship game, that would have been an easy situation. We blew this. Good time to do it. Boom. But you make the conference championship game, you can't fire them then. Play things out. Hey, maybe if they win that game, he ain't getting fired. They're not firing the coach after winning Conference USA. But the loss, kind of being lopsided by the end, I think ultimately gave the cover where to go. The name, one of the names that's been around this job for a while is Justin Fuente. He's an Oklahoma native, obviously former Memphis coach, former Virginia Tech coach. I saw him at a TCU game this year. He used to coach there. He was in town. Some people, he may have kind of moved back to the area, the DFW area while he's not coaching, so that might help. He's been around that. Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator at TCU, will obviously be a name to watch. He's a Broyles Award finalist, done a great job. Coached at SMU, coached at TCU. You might as well hit every school in the DFW area, I guess. And I think those are the two names probably going to be most featured prominently, or at least North Texas may be interested in.
Absolutely. By the way, for those of you listening, we were able, while Sirius was taking over some of the talking, I reset my app and I can see Chris and Sirius, but I can't see the audience. However, I've noticed people are putting questions in the comments, which, we are reading them, and we'll try to ask a few of those as well. In fact, before we move on to talk a bit about the playoffs, Chuck asked, have you heard any news about Dan Mullen to, I guess, as an OC role, taking it potentially, he says SC, but I'm not sure if he means South Carolina there. But what have you heard about Dan Mullen? Because he's popped up several times. I mean, he's one of those great free agents, like, Tom Herman, where they were being named for different roles. And of course, obviously, Herman's now at FAU. What have you heard about Dan Mullen?
He is a guy who I think knows he can afford to be picky. I don't believe his buyout had any offset, so he didn't have to do that. He's got a cushy ESPN gig that's working great there. He did a decent job at Florida. Like, it wasn't terrible. He went to 3 New Year's Six bowl games. He's not someone who needs to maybe take some group of 5 job or even maybe an offensive coordinator job. He did a pretty good. He has a very good record as a coach. You kind of sit it out while at ESPN, rehab your image a bit, and then find the right spot. I think UAB might have been interested. I don't think he was interested in them. But yeah, haven't heard his name around much otherwise at this point.
Okay, you mentioned UAB. We got to ask, what's your thoughts on Trent Dilfer?
I can see how he talked his way into the job. He is a very good public speaker. He's done this for a very long time, and if you watch that press conference, you could see, like, all right, this guy knows how to, like, get people excited. I had the same thought watching the Deion Sanders press conference at Colorado, where it's like, all right, this guy knows how to do the public speaking type of thing. Like, you can see, obviously Deion has been a head coach and won at Jackson State, but you could kind of see how that came together. It's just a very odd story. I mean, like I said, UAB took some big swings, did not get a lot of interest back, and the way things came together with Trent Dilfer was that the AD just called up Trent Dilfer one day. I think he said a local businessman may have connected the two of them, but he just called them, and it was supposed to be like a 10-minute chat. They end up talking for like an hour and a half, and the AD just, like, Mark Ingram just falls in love with this guy, and they talk some more, and they talk some more, and you realize, all right, Trent Dilfer, you get him in the room to talk to somebody, he could probably convince you of something.
That's hilarious.
And that's what he did. I mean, people up in Tennessee vouched for him as a coach and that type of deal. And, I think some of the QB training he's done, like I heard, like Tua Tagovailoa may have been involved, or at least said something really nice about him. And, like, it's it's weird. UAB is a good job, should be a very good job. The facilities are very nice. It's moving into the American. It pays pretty well, at least for the head coach. The staff might be a little bit different, but it pays well for the head coach. And you expected them to get something bigger done. I mean, you look at some of the other hires that were made in the cycle at a group of 5 spots. Jamie Chadwell goes to Liberty. It feels like UAB maybe could have done a bit better. I know some people are incredibly down on the Dilfer hire. I don't know what to expect. It's probably not going to work because most coaching hires don't work. But Trent Dilfer's done a lot of things that people didn't expect him to do, and so I wouldn't exactly count him out, at least.
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing about it was I know the AD Mark Ingram had said he interviewed at least 25 people, and then you're like, oh wow, they'll probably have a really well grounded selection, and you're just kind of like, okay, this is the shocker of the entire coaching cycle. But again, I wonder if that's how the call went. Like, you seem really nice. Would you like the job?
I'll just say as a Tennessee native that it was really surprising to see the first like real Tennessee high school coach to make the jump up that quickly was somebody at Lipscomb Academy. Because there have been some really good football head coaches that have run absolute powerhouses that just haven't really gotten any attention. So I mean, George Quarles at Maryville, if you played for them, you were probably going to get at least 3 championship rings in your high school career, if not 4.
Yeah,
now he's at ETSU now. So, but he had to go to Furman as a position coach and work his way up, and it took him 4 years basically in order to get a shot at a higher level thing, which making the jump from a small private school straight up to UAB, that's a big leap. But obviously he's got some other stuff with notoriety and things like that helps out a lot.
Right, being a high school coach is not why he got the job. If he had been a bad high school coach, he wouldn't have gotten the job. But he's got the job because he's a former NFL player. He's on TV a lot. He does the Elite 11. He did the opening. He's very involved in a lot of QB recruiting. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get 5-star quarterback recruits to come to UAB, but that's the kind of stuff that ultimately got him the job. The fact that he was a pretty good high school coach, building that program up from what it was, helps. And if I'm not an expert in Tennessee high school football, my understanding is they're moving up to a bigger, tougher division next year, right?
The private schools are in their own because they can offer essentially scholarships. So I think there's 2 divisions for private schools.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my understanding. That was it's kind of like a separate, there's Division 1, Division 2, and they're in the Division 2, I think, and it's kind of its own little world with them and some of the Nashville and Knoxville private schools that like Webb, which is where former Jets quarterback actually came out of there. But yeah, that they're their own little ecosystem, as it will.
Chris, when you were kind of describing what potentially made Dilfer attractive, I was thinking when we first heard that announcement, it was actually when we were having just sort of an open mic talk last Tuesday, and we were trying to even think what's the last high school coach to jump, being from a head coach directly to being a head coach of a college team, not going sideways and taking being a high school head coach and then becoming a position coach or an offensive coordinator. I mean, going straight through. And the only one I could even think of that was successful was actually Dion, because I mean they hired him out of. But other than him, I mean, we always think of Jerry Faust. We think of Sanchez at UNLV. We think of guys that fiasco North Texas itself went through. It's so rare to see anyone do that. So part of me the way you described Dilfer made me think even of a little bit about Deion Sanders. I'm not saying quite the same, but I wonder if that also made that option seem a little less crazy. Because you could always say, hey, he made the jump up. And granted, Jackson State was arguably a tougher job than UAB. moving up to it. But I want to just change gears a little
Well,
bit because
real quick on that, I don't want to make a comparison on that. It is similar to Dion because he's a former NFL player. Like there's a different part of that. But Dion also wasn't a head coach at Trinity Christian here in the Dallas area. He was the offensive coordinator actually. So he went from high school assistant to college head coach. But that is the most similar one. I think the last high school head coach to go to FBS head coach was Tony Sanchez at UNLV. That did not go well because it's UNLV and they don't typically win. Before that, probably Todd Dodge at North Texas, which is also a disaster. So not a great track record, but again, the only NFL guy to compare it to is the one who just got the Colorado job. So
exactly. So what are your thoughts?
This is prime prep erasure. I'm just going to go and throw that out there. So,
well, there was here in the Dallas
technically
area,
the head coach.
Well, yeah, and like speaking of North Texas, like there were some people who thought he might be a guy for them, or that there were people around North Texas who wanted to hire him because he is a former Dallas Cowboy and high school coach in the Dallas area where I live. But also, Prime Prep turned a lot of people off of him for a while. So like school presidents did not want to be associated with that. That was a complete mess that messed up some, kids' lives. And so the idea that, hey, why did nobody hire Dion before, blah, 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 like that turned a lot of presidents off. So like there it wasn't just because he's, out there and being Dion. That wasn't the only reason he didn't get bigger jobs. But no, Prime Prep is definitely something to always keep in mind.
What are your thoughts on the way the CFP handled the Final Four teams, as well as, well, we can move on to other bowls after that. What do you think? Did the top four work this year?
Yeah. In most years, it's easy. Most years, we debate throughout the year, and then we get to the end of the year, and it's a pretty easy top four. That's other than the first year, 2014, and maybe those years we felt like UCF should be in. It's been very easy to do this, and it was. TCU should have been ahead of Ohio State. It made sense to keep them at 3. I didn't love USC playing a Pac-12 championship game and then moving down, but they lost to the same team twice. So, like, you'll see in my 131 rankings that come out tomorrow, USC is behind Utah because they have to be behind Utah because they lost to them twice. So there was no choice. It was an obvious top 4, and it honestly is obvious most years. We get all bent out of shape during the year and forget that by the end of the year, it's usually pretty simple.
Do you think that we're going to make it through the 4-team CFP era with no 2-win teams making it, or 2-loss teams making it into the top 4? Because the window is narrowing, and looking back, some comparisons got made back to when 2-loss LSU won it all. Just how chaotic that season was, and we just haven't quite matched that.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's only one more year left, 2023. Because then by 2024, we're in the 12-team playoffs. So there's only 1 year left for a 2-loss team to get in. That is kind of wild to think, but I think that just goes further to prove how crazy 2007 was and just how unique of a season that was and how unlikely it is to ever happen again. But this year,
great season. It was a great season lived through.
This year at times felt pretty close. You didn't get the upsets of number 1, number 2, but you got upsets pretty much everywhere else. And as a result you had 2-loss LSU going into the final week of the regular season with a chance to make the playoff. Ultimately, it didn't happen. But I'm going to say no just because the odds are very low. But it got close.
What do you think? I mean, one of the questions in the comments, and I've never really thought of it myself, but I want to share it. Do you think that the 12-team playoff is going to be the future? Or is there any chance after a few years they're going to maybe consider expanding it beyond 12?
Well, we don't know what the contract is yet. They have not. They haven't created the contract for 2026 and beyond yet. That is still something they need to work out. That'll include who broadcasts it, what the revenue stream is, what the bowl situation is. Technically, all we have in place right now is 2024 and 2025. So how long is that contract? We'll see. they're still in the first CFB contract. It started 2014. It was a 12-year contract to do that first playoff. And obviously they ended up expanding before they got to the end of it. So do they look at that and say, let's do a shorter deal, for competition purposes, for potential change of purposes? Or do all those other conferences say, no, we want a long-term deal because we don't want a situation where the Big Ten and the SEC could get out of it and create their own Super League, Super Playoff, or whatever. So we don't know yet how long it's going to be post 2026. They still have to figure out that contract. It could be 8 years, it could be 10, it could be 12. Honestly, don't know. But I think the way 2024 and 2025 go could impact how people feel about things. Bill Hancock left the door open to potentially play quarterfinals on home sites if it goes really well in 2024, basically. So we'll see. We don't know yet.
I'm just glad they're somewhat open to making those adjustments, because it doesn't feel like before. It always felt like, no. In fact, we've never envisioned ever doing anything else. And you're kind of like, okay, this is almost like forced tunnel vision when you're talking to them and hearing their answers. So in a way, it's a bit of a relief to even get that, frankly, out of them. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I asked Bill Hancock, like, hey, do you think this expanded playoff will hurt the regular season? And he said, no. I think the playoff has obviously been great for the regular season. And I went back and looked back. Hey, when this guy was the BCS director, he said he didn't want a playoff because it was going to hurt the regular season. So, like, you can't really buy what those people say, because they're just going to say whatever is best for what they're doing.
Exactly.
Of course, the guy who's in charge of the playoff feels like the playoff has been great for the regular season.
Chris, I just wanted to do a quick time check with you. Do you have time for a little bit more chat?
Yeah, I'm good right now. By the way, while this is going on, Michael Penix Jr. coming back next season for Washington. I love that.
Oh, that's going to be great. Do you think I know a lot of folks in Washington really wanted to see him get an invite to New York. I'm not sure if that would happen, but certainly one more season can't hurt, because he definitely had some moments this season.
Yeah, no. The thing with the Heisman ballot, I filled out my ballot today, like, the hardest thing is usually not picking the winner. It's picking 2 and 3, because you want to pick 5 guys. It's hard to narrow down that 2 and 3. I wish we got 5 options. I wish they invited 5 people to the ceremony every year, just so we can honor as many players as possible in this situation, because there's so many guys who deserve it. And Michael Penix Jr. was one of those guys.
Absolutely. When we're looking at the rest of the New Year's Six, which of those matchups has you the most intrigued?
I'm sorry, you said the New Year's Six?
Yeah, the rest of the big bowls.
It's either Kansas State, Alabama, because I'm curious if all of Alabama is going to opt out, and it could be a Kansas State beatdown, so to speak, or maybe USC Tulane, because we know USC can put up points, but they can't stop anybody. And I think Michael Pratt in that offense against the USC defense could be a lot of fun. I'm probably going to be at that game, the Cotton Bowl here in Dallas. I think those stick out to me for unique reasons.
I'm really excited to kind of see the tire statue they're going to make for Tulane. I mean, I've seen the USC one before. Yeah. They've been there before, but I'm kind of curious to see if they're going to make the angry wave out of tires. I hope that's what they pick.
Probably the biggest one they've ever had to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Penn State one was kind of tiny, a little cougar. Let's have something huge. Let's have a giant, anthropomorphic wave, holding holding an announcer's tube or whatever you call it. Gosh, how about with the rest of the bowls? And I know we may have something coming up to talk, but I mean, with the rest of the bowls, which ones have got you interested? I mean, there's some intrigue. There's usually intriguing matchups every year. But, some of these I have got me raising my eyebrows, and I'm curious what you're thinking.
Well, I'm starting with the Cure Bowl, which is the second bowl on the schedule, and yet it's a ranked matchup between Conference USA champion UTSA and Sun Belt champion Troy. That is going to be an awesome game. I wish that I think it's like Friday afternoon or something like that. I hope people watch that game. Those are 2 11-2 teams. I'm very excited about the Cure Bowl. Also, the Las Vegas Bowl, Oregon State, Florida. Is Oregon State going to run the ball down the throats of Florida? Can can a Pac-12 school do that against an SEC school? We don't see Pac-12 SEC very much, so that'll be fun. Florida State, Oklahoma for the brands. That's just anytime those two teams come together in the Cheez-It Bowl, which is still weird. And then
speaking of brands, yeah.
and then speaking of Michael Penix Jr., the Alamo Bowl, Washington versus Texas. I guess we don't know if Bijan Robinson will play in that game, but I assume Michael Penix will since he's coming back. So that'll be exciting too. So yeah, they're honestly, I think those bowls are often some of the most interesting kind of as it plays out rather than some of the New Year's Six.
You also have, with the Holiday Bowl, you've got North Carolina versus Oregon. Dan Lanning says Bo Nix is going to be back for the bowl game, which some people are interpreting as he may also be planning on coming back next season. So that could be interesting with obviously if Drake May comes and plays for North Carolina. Couple of big name passers in that game.
Yeah, no, for sure. Obviously, Drake May is going to be back next year. That. North Carolina's weird. They've been a weird team the last 3 weeks, but that should be a game with a lot of points. Holiday Bowl usually delivers. Is that game still on? Is that game on ESPN? Wasn't the Holiday Bowl usually like on Fox or its own? It's like one of those few bowls that's not on.
It's on Fox, yeah.
It's on Fox, yeah. It always stands out because you like forget about it because it's kind of just off doing its own thing.
It'll be 8 p.m. on Fox, and then lined up opposite on ESPN is the Texas Bowl with Texas Tech and Ole Miss.
Yeah, the other misfit toy is the Sun Bowl, which is always on CBS, and I still remember watching some of the most confused commentary when they'd have like Gary and I still remember when I was watching that fiasco where Lane Kiffin kind of looked like the Unabomber on the sideline. I forgot who they were playing. Oh my gosh. It was Georgia Tech, because it looked like USC had never played the triple option or even known that Paul Johnson was going to be coming in with that triple option. But yeah, I just remember like he called every player, half the players were wrong, like half the names were wrong, and it's just like, oh, this is awesome. This is totally like didn't even do any prep for this game. This is great. But that said, we love the Sun Bowl. It's a fun bowl. We've sent people there.
That was the Sun Bowl where there were all the, I don't know if it was rumors or reports about USC players getting fights or suspended or something like that. The Sun Bowl is always feels like something always goes down at the Sun Bowl every year.
Yes.
The fact that Pitt is there, bringing back memories of I don't know if it was their last Sun Bowl appearance, but their most famous Sun Bowl appearance.
That was the one where Georgia Tech only got there because of a special exemption, right? Because like the two teams ahead of them in the ACC standings were ineligible, so they got sent as 6-6 to the championship game and lost. So they technically were 6-7, and everybody's like, "Well, it's not really your fault. You're 6-7, so we're gonna let you go to a bowl game anyway."
They almost won that. They almost won that ACC championship game too.
Yeah, that was kind of just a wild season for them in general. I mean, the weirdest way to finish the year 7-7.
7-7 is my favorite record in college football, and it happens every once in a while. I think North Texas did it once. Georgia Tech did it that year. Always love
7-7 with no Hawaii game is like that's hard mode.
Yes, I think Hawaii might have done a 7-7 recently too, although it makes sense for them.
Ron, I think you should have hopefully been able to join us now. I can see you at least. So if you got a question?
Not a question, just it's a comment because we're getting close to bowl season. It's my yearly complaining that the Fiesta Bowl is no longer sponsored by Tostitos. That made way too much sense. Way too much sense, and they need to bring that back.
That one still hurts to not take. I think it's Verbo now. Which
it was weird when they did that 1 year of Verbo, or not Verbo, Battle Frog.
Battle Frog.
Yes, the Battle Toads.
I still don't know what Battle Frog is.
I looked it up. I'm pretty sure if I'm remembering correctly, it's like a international CrossFit competition.
That's basically what it is. It's one of those like Iron Man. It's not Iron Man, but where people go through crazy, like almost like marine training, but on like steroids, where it's just like you do bonkers stuff the whole time. But again, I was like, where are they getting this money? And then clearly they may not have had. I mean, Duck Commander was the other fiasco because that was such a fiasco. The Independence Bowl never received a dime, and I think they actually ended up paying out a little bit to get that 1 year and done, mess up that they had with Duck Commander.
I'd gotten used to the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. They brought back the old Fiesta Bowl logo, so I'd gotten accustomed to it. And now it's not PlayStation anymore. Now it's Verbo, and so these things get confusing. Tostitos, what are you doing? How did you get out of this? Are they owned by the Frito-Lay company? I don't know who owns Tostitos, but that was the most perfect bowl sponsor we've ever had. It was just the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. It just rolled up. It made sense. It's like the Outback Bowl. We lost the Outback Bowl now, and it's like, is nothing sacred anymore?
It's not. It just felt right, Yeah. That's the issue.
Yeah. PepsiCo just let us all down.
For all the Tostitos, it was perfect.
Also, a few weeks ago, we spent a long time talking about Deion Sanders, and I don't think anybody predicted him actually going to Colorado. That actually blew me away that happened.
Well, the fact that he was pretty open about the fact that he had the offer from Colorado, I think kind of signaled to be like, hey, guys, I've got this job. Anybody want to come hire me instead of Colorado? And I don't think he got the interest that he wanted to. And so he ends up going to Boulder. Obviously, Auburn was not interested. Some of these other places didn't work. Georgia Tech was never really going to be a fit, I don't think. And so he ends up at Colorado, which good for the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 has needed some positive momentum. It has been a tough few years for the Pac-12. They cost themselves another spot in the CFP. They're losing USC and UCLA. Still don't know about the media deal. But now you got Deion coming in, and that's going to be just excitement no matter what. So good for the Pac-12 to get that.
I have to ask you, Chris, did you love that response that was reported today where they asked the AD, how are you planning to pay for Deion? And he was like, don't know, but we'll figure it out. It's just kind of like, what?
I didn't see, I only saw the tweet. I didn't see if there was a clip of it anywhere, exactly how he said it. But these schools don't always have the money that they say they have. They're they'll they're announcing that they're opening a new indoor practice facility, but they haven't actually raised the money for it yet. So it could kind of be in that same boat. But to hear an AD just straight up say it was surprising. But look, he's making like $2 million more than Carl Durrell did. And this is the kind of money that they lost Mel Tucker over, because Michigan State doubled Mel Tucker's salary and the assistant salary pool after 1 year there. So Colorado didn't have the money for a while. That was a concern about their search and how it was going. And, other people were very, very in on the job, ended up not wanting the job. But now Deion's got the job, and apparently they're going to change some admissions stuff so they can get better transfers. So they're going all in on Deion here.
Well, here's how you pay for coaches. How you pay for coaches that you can't afford, and this is the last thing I'll say before I have to go. What you do is you pay them anyways. You go in debt, and then you beg the governor to forgive the debt, like Rutgers did, and that's how you do it.
That's not a bad idea. I don't know if it'll work in Colorado, but that's not a bad idea.
All right. Well, thanks for taking my call, guys.
Always, man. Gosh, when we were talking about, good sponsorships, my favorite sponsorship, because I didn't even know there was a company involved, was the Great Western Forum, because I grew up knowing it as the Great Western Forum. And it's a bank called Great Western. They no longer exist. They were bought in 1997. But that I think is in the pantheon of great sponsorships, because when you heard great.
Yeah, I only found out it was a sponsor this year when I saw a wrestling show there, and it's called the Kia Forum.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, why is it not the Great Western Forum? Oh, that was a sponsor? I had no idea. So I don't know if that's a good sponsorship or a bad sponsorship, because nobody associated it with the bank.
Indeed. By the way, what do you think, which of the bowl games is you the least in, and we always know that we could say this bowl is probably going to be boring, and that could be the one that goes into 7 overtimes. But which matchup are you least interested in, or the one that you're kind of like, oh, okay, I guess these two got stuck together?
Are we counting 6-6 G5 teams? Because I'm thinking Rice and Southern Miss in the Lending Tree Bowl. think that used to be the Dollar General Bowl and the GMAC Bowl. It's in Mobile. I mean, that's a 5-7 team and a 6-6 team. I like those teams, but it's not the most exciting matchup. I'm kind of scrolling through everything else here. New Mexico State versus Bowling Green in the Quick Lane Bowl. Kind of another one of those.
How about
I'll tell you, here's a Power 5 one, though. Wisconsin, Oklahoma State. Not looking forward to that, really. It's going to be 10:15 o'clock Eastern in what used to be the Cheez-It Bowl, used to be the Copper Bowl, used to be the Insight Bowl, now the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Not looking forward to that one very much.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that Kentucky-Iowa game is, because somebody had to get paired up with Iowa. And, it's going to be in Nashville, Music City Bowl. A lot of people are going to end up seeing it because it's on ABC, so it's going to be accessible to most fans. But that one, less intrigued about that one.
I can't believe they're playing the same team 2 years in a row in a bowl. Like, I know it's happened before, but like of the 2 teams you would not want to put back together back to back, these are the 2 teams. Last year's game was 17-20. I think Kentucky had a late touchdown, if I recall. It might have been Wendell Robinson or something. I don't, but yeah, that's kind of another one of those like games.
And there were some like extracurriculars too, weren't there? With that bowl game last year?
That sounds familiar.
With one of their kind of Kentucky star players, I want to say.
I don't. They all blur together, the years in the bowls. Something like that, probably.
I feel you.
On the Wisconsin one, there may be a little bit of a wrinkle there with the news about Fickell maybe having some kind of a role coaching the team in some form or fashion. But we've seen bowl games where a new coach has been in attendance and he's just kind of like watch it from a box or something like that. But actually having some kind of coaching duties would be a relatively unusual setup, I think.
The last time I remember that happening was when Sonny Dykes took the SMU job and coached in the Frisco Bowl like 2 days later because Chad Morris had left for Arkansas, took like the whole staff with him. It was Sonny Dykes and a bunch of GAs. They played Louisiana Tech. They turned the ball over, I think, on their first 3 possessions of the game and got blown out. It did not go well. I don't know why Luke Fickell would coach this game, especially if Jim Leonard is on your staff. I would just have Leonard coaching and you just kind of be on the fly on the wall. I don't know. It does seem weird to me.
How long do you think it's going to be until Cincy replaces Fickell?
Pretty soon. It should be like there have been people around the search who ended up going elsewhere, down to potentially Sean Lewis, Mo Linguist, maybe a couple other names getting in it late because I don't know if people are thrilled about hiring a MAC coach with a sub 500 record. I don't know. This I don't think it should be wrapped up pretty soon just because all of these things are going pretty quickly because of the timing. But this could go a few different ways still.
I know I was talking to a fan of Fresno State because obviously they win the Mountain West. And they are a little disappointed because they get stuck with a middle of the pack Pac-12 team. And they've got Wazoo. And from what I understand, they somehow, just from the vagaries of the way the bowls are picked in the Pac-12, they got I think they got a team that was lower ranked than they typically would have. And I'm sure there was some reason for that, probably another, how they pick maybe who will show up. And Wazoo isn't necessarily known as being a team that shows up in Southern California. I still remember that infamous Rose Bowl with Oklahoma, when that was the year where, the Orange Bowl pulled a trick out of the BCS hat and got to pick twice in a row. So they got that Iowa USC match.
Oh yeah.
And then the Rose Bowl was horrified because they got stuck with, they didn't get stuck, but Wazoo was a Pac-12 champ. And then they got, a non-traditional matchup. And then Wazoo didn't show up. Like Oklahoma fans showed up, but the Wazoo fans, there were actually open sections in that stadium. So here we got the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl. And Fresno State fans are hyped. They're going to show up because a lot of Fresno State fans in Southern California, obviously, but they're a little disappointed by the matchup there. And I kind of get it because it seems like a bit of a shame where the best team in the Mountain West still has to play someone in the middle of the pack.
Look, if I had my way, I would have all kinds of Group of 5, Power 5 bowl matchups, but it's just unfortunately not the way these things are. They don't typically want to play Group of 5 teams in bowls, and understandably, they may not travel as well for the most part. So I get why, but I wish we could see UTSA against a Power 5 team. I wish we could get Troy against a Power 5 team instead of them playing each other. It's basically just like that year they had
Boise State versus TCU
in the Fiesta Bowl, and I think 1 year in the Poinsettia Bowl, I think they did it as well. It's like that. I wish we could get Group of 5 champs playing Power 5 teams. It's just unfortunately not the way the bowl tie-ins are set up. But remember last year, Utah State beat Oregon State in this game. The Mountain West champ did. So it's an opportunity for the Mountain West to put a feather in its cap. Mountain West, I think, won the Bowl Cup last year, and Pac-12 was terrible in bowl games last year. So, those are the spots where if you want to be like, hey, we're a Group of 5 champion, we'd be pretty good in a Power 5 league. These are the games you got to win.
The Mountain West championship game itself was kind of a bit unusual too, because Boise State had some out-of-conference losses, which is historically for the past 15 years has been a little atypical, and then turns it on for conference play and runs the table, and then the team that they blew out in the regular season comes back and handles them pretty handily, all things considered. It's kind of a wild whiplash of a season for the Broncos this year.
Well, yeah, it turns out for Fresno State, having Jake Haener makes a difference. They started 1-4. Haener got hurt against they lose on the last play of the game to Oregon State. Haener gets hurt against USC. They lose to UConn. They lose to Boise. They get a win or two. He comes back, and they haven't lost since. They've won 8 games in a row. So this is the Fresno State we expected coming into the season. I think Jake Haener's injury just kind of threw a real wrench into things. And for Boise, yeah, you fire the OC after 2 or 3 games. Hank Bachmeier goes in the portal, and you're like, I don't know if Andy Avalos is going to make it much longer at Boise State. They rally. They win all the rest of their games except for the BYU game. Andy Avalos is Coach of the Year. Taylon Green looks like a future stud at quarterback. He got so much better as the year goes on. But then you lose to Fresno State at home, and that kind of puts a real damper on the real momentum I think you thought you had. So we kind of go into the offseason perhaps with a few more questions about Boise State than we had.
I just have to say that the bowl pairing I like, just because the climate matches the teams, is the Pinstripe Bowl. You've got Syracuse and Minnesota playing outside in New York. Those are the 2 teams where I'm like, okay, that they'll be ready for it. That'll actually match it. Now, I don't know. I'm sure Syracuse can bring fans into that. I'm not sure it's going to be packed. But the Minnesota fans, they're not getting their traditional, sunny Sunbelt sort of vacation down south somewhere, either, preferably in Arizona or Florida. But when I saw that matchup, I kind of, being here in Minnesota, kind of warmed my heart a bit.
The Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. Don't forget that part.
Oh, is that what it is now?
Is that what it is now?
Yeah, we lost them on the Gasparilla Bowl, which I think was also one that was kind of like the one that has a parade with these crazy, Mardi Gras-esque floats and everything. With the Bad Boy Mowers sponsorship, like it fit, and now we get it with the Pinstripe Bowl in New York.
When I think of Yankees, I think of Bad Boy Mowers.
Who doesn't think about
Yankee Stadium is about the only grass that you can mow in New York.
With the kind of mowers that Bad Boy makes, sure. Maybe there's a market for plug-in electric mowers, like push mowers, but most in New York City, I don't think you need a zero turn.
This reminds me of the old Zaxby's Heart of Dallas Bowl. There is not a Zaxby's in Dallas. That was always weird to me.
Classic.
Maybe the New York zero turn mower refers to how many times you actually literally have to turn around when you're mowing your lawn. Yeah, it's just one swipe.
But also for the Pinstripe Bowl, keep in your thoughts the media who have to cover that game. Yankee Stadium is an open air press box. They give out knitted hats and gloves to the media who have to attend, but it's generally considered it's a miserable experience to cover that game, I've been told, although the Yankees also do a first-class job of treating the teams well. That's one thing I've heard. Like, the people who organize that do a very good job for the teams. But tough. It's a tough one for the media out there. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
That's amazing.
I guess the upside is that, if they did have a shrimp cocktail platter, you wouldn't have to worry about it getting to be room temperature.
Hey, you know what? They keep teasing me about this because you were at, I thought the Lucas Oil Stadium spread was great last January, and those, oh God, what was it called? Those shrimp, those giant shrimp. I forgot the name.
Elmo's, Lake St. Elmo's.
The Elmo's.
I wasn't even there.
I shared a photo of the shrimp secondhand. Like, you're eating room temperature shrimp in Indiana. I'm like, when you say it that way, yes, it sounds like an alarming thing, but they'll be able to keep them on ice in New York. Well, Chris, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We know it's been really busy. That surprise, Seth Luttrell. I mean, not a shocker, but just the timing of it was kind of out of nowhere in the evening. But we appreciate you taking time to come back and talk to us. It's always wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting weekend as well, because remember, a couple years ago, Seth Luttrell almost took the Kansas State job, and they couldn't come together on an agreement on some things. He stays at North Texas. Now he's fired one day after Chris Kleiman wins the Big 12 at Kansas State. So timing is everything with the coaching cycle. Got to have the right guy at the right time, the right availability. You never know. Coaching carousel is going to continue to spin. There will always be a big surprise or two late in the cycle. So lots still to go. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks. Sirius, do you have some final thoughts?
Just thinking back to, earlier in the season, actually it might have been right before the season kicked off, where, we had discussed North Texas and kind of how surprising it was to see Seth Luttrell on the hot seat. And obviously now he's been fired, but given where he was just a few years ago, like Chris had said, he was on the short list for some positions, had a lot of hype about maybe getting pulled up to P5, and he decided to stick it out. Couldn't find the right fit, couldn't come to the right agreement. And then you can see just how quickly, the sands have shifted for him. Really, it kind of reinforces the whole thing of it's great to see coaches want to stick around and build something, especially when you're talking about like a G5 or an FCS coach. But at the same time, you can understand why it is so hard for them to turn down the opportunity, the money that's involved with making that jump up to P5, or even from a lower level P5 to a higher one, just because things change so quickly in this sport.
Yeah, there's so many what ifs and how they did, and part of me is also just thinking about Deion Sanders' decision to take that Colorado job, because again, I think a fair number of people were surprised that was where he was willing to agree to, rather than perhaps play another season or coach another season, at Jackson State. But he did his move, and I was impressed. He released the video of him telling his team. We shared that on Twitter, and you can look it up. It was a YouTube clip of him telling the team that he was taking that new position. And I don't think he even said Colorado initially. He just was basically, because that was irrelevant, he was just basically telling them, yep, I'm moving on, and telling his players not to necessarily all jump into the portal, only because he was like, we'll be there for you, but make sure, you figure out where you're going to do best. It was interesting. It was just a fascinating listen. I thought, if you've never heard a coach give that kind of a talk, it was a good listen, and I recommend looking that one up. But all of that said, go ahead.
I can't believe that he didn't go with the classic Tommy Tuberville approach of, like sending out a text to the team that he was leaving, and that was the notification. When he went from Texas Tech to Cincinnati, I think it was.
Wasn't he in the middle of? Was he the one who was in the middle of like a dinner with a recruit? And then he got the text from his agent that it was finalized. And he's like, "All right, gonna go. See ya." Just like
just skipped out, entirely. Some coaches do it with some respect to the team that they're leaving, and some coaches definitely do not. Kind of, repeated denials. No, I'm not going anywhere. No, I'm not going anywhere. And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, yep, peace. I'm out. It'll be interesting to see, because Dion talked a really big game about the HBCUs and the HBCU experience, to see what happens in the next couple of months with this transition. Especially are we going to see a Lincoln Riley type situation where a lot of recruits and a lot of players follow him? Is that something he's going to seek out, or is this going to be a case where he's not going to try to bring anybody over? We know he's going to, he's got some kids on the team of his own, so he's already mentioned basically that they're going to be coming with him. Interestingly, Brent Venables, when he went to Oklahoma, did not do that. His son stayed at Clemson. So it'll be interesting to see how much talent he pulls with him to Colorado, or if he kind of takes a more hands-off approach and doesn't just raid them of whatever talent that he had built up there.
I agree, and I got to say, Colorado in a lot of ways got. I'm not going to say the biggest win in this coaching cycle, but one of the biggest surprises, because that was a team that was just listing, because even before the season, there was a good article, I believe in The Athletic, actually, which of course Chris was from, writing about what had happened to Colorado, where they had gone from being one of the top 3 schools represented in the NFL. It was like Miami, Notre Dame, and then Colorado for a while there, about 15 years ago, and how they had kind of fallen to where they are now. And if you're going to turn it around, and I think part of I forgot who the coach was, but they interviewed him. It's like, it looked easier than it must have looked a lot easier to those at home, but it was actually really hard to keep this program to where it was, and, splitting a national title and all of that stuff. But, if there was someone who's going to make that splash and potentially get Colorado back on the right track, hey, I'll give him credit. I mean, if he doesn't get it, fine. But the fact that they got Deion Sanders is a lot, and I think that'll help excite a lot of fans up there in Boulder and across the state of Colorado. But
I mean, he definitely comes with a better coaching reputation right now than Carl Durrell did. I always thought that was a real head scratcher of a hire for Colorado. Not really sure what they were thinking with that decision. And I mean, we all saw how it turned out. It was not a great experience. So we'll see if Rick George did a better job this time with the Deion Sanders hire.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was just looking back, that real good stretch for Colorado is when they had Bill McCartney, Rick Neuheisel, which he was excellent there, and then he moved on to Washington, and then Gary Barnett. Those 3, and Barnett had his own kind of mess off the field stuff that started to happen with the team, but they won a lot, and then they just went through Dan Hawkins, who was a shocker. I am still surprised how bad of a failure that was. Now he's doing great again at FCS, at his alma mater at UC Davis. John Embry, Mike McIntyre, another surprise, didn't quite work out. Mel Tucker, who was just poached immediately, and then Carl Durrell. And now we've got Deion. So there we go. Well, we've been on for a little over an hour. I think this is typically when we'd like to wrap up. This was our CFB Talk 114. We had the Athletics' Chris Vannini. So on behalf of myself, Bob Kyrie, on behalf of Sirius, thank you all for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.